Well, hey, everybody. It's back to your next episode of Hanging with TJ. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers. How y'all doing out there? So today I want to talk about, my hair. It's such a mess. It's hard to do anything with your hair these days. The humidity's been crazy here in Virginia, but I digress. I want to talk about something that after exploring your interweb, I've been reading a lot about how there's been so many mass shootings lately. And before we get into the NRA and before we get into the Second Amendment and what we, as your founding fathers, really meant, I want to talk about something that I hear all the time on this thing called the radio, where magic comes through the air into a box and you can hear people talking. Well, I've been exploring a lot of your technology, and I was listening to some of these radio programs, and I hear people talk all the time about law-abiding citizens. Now, if you study anything about myself, Thomas Jefferson, or any of the other founding fathers, you will come to understand that we believed in justice. Justice and liberty walk hand in hand. But the thing that drives me crazy is this term, law-abiding citizen. Now, everyone is a law-abiding citizen until they are not. So, the way that you should draft your laws is not to prevent freedoms for the masses, but to instill cautious observation. And what I mean by this is anybody can have a bad day. You may live 50 years and be a perfect law-abiding citizen, and then one day you get angry or fed up, or you just go crazy and you kill 50 people. So this idea of law-abiding citizen is only until that moment the person no longer is a law-abiding citizen. So how do we solve this problem? Well, one of the things that I, Thomas Jefferson, talked about and wrote was, I believe that the Constitution is a living document. And I wrote that the Constitution should change with the time. That the Constitution shouldn't be tied to the past generations because times change. And you can read about this. You can read about how I said that the Constitution was a living document that needed to be changed as society advanced. So what I mean by this is, now let's go to the Second Amendment. I did not write the Second Amendment. James Madison did. When the Constitution was being written, I was a diplomat in France for a couple of years. But I did, correspond with Madison and talk to him about certain ideas. And see, you have to understand that when the Second Amendment was written, we did not have standing armies. And we relied on the militia to be able to defend cities and homesteads and people. So we needed a strong militia in order to protect the country. And later on, in years to come, your militias would become your National Guard, which makes sense. And as smart as we, as your founding fathers, were, we could have never foreseen weapons of mass destruction that can fire 1,000 rounds in a minute. We were used to guns that were highly inaccurate. That's why armies had to line up like chess players on a field and get in a line in order to do the most damage, because the balls were these round balls, and when they were fired, they would zip off into, if the wind was right, into different directions. So in order to actually hit what you were aiming at, you needed a good line of 50 guys. We didn't have rifling back then. The weapons you have these days have rifling, which makes the bullet much more accurate and much more deadly. And like I said, we never could imagine 1,000 rounds coming out of a gun. As smart as we were, we weren't that smart. You have to realize that we lived in a time before electricity. We still pooped in buckets and threw it out the window. We wrote with feathers and ink, and we lit our homes with candles or kerosene lamps. You have to understand the time that we lived in. It was before pretty much any medicine, antibiotics. There was herbs and things like that, but there was no such thing as aspirin or antibiotics or, penicillin. That's why we cut off limbs, because we couldn't stop gangrene and infection. So you have to realize, as smart as we were in a lot of ways, compared to you, we were cavemen. We were so primitive. Our weapons, you were lucky if you could fire 3 rounds in a minute. They had to be reloaded after every shot. So we could have never imagined weapons like you have today. And that's why I stated that the Constitution is a living document, and that's why we as your founding fathers allowed for amendments to be placed into it, and why we ourselves put amendments into it, because we knew as times changed, things needed to be updated for the era that it was happening in. So getting back to this law-abiding citizen nonsense, everybody, like I said, is law-abiding until they're not. So what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to take away the rights of everybody in order to, stop future crimes? No. But what you do is you put into effect laws that are able to hopefully weed out those who don't deserve weapons, and in some cases ban certain weapons that do the most destruction. No commoner owned a cannon back in my times. And you would never go to somebody's house and see cannons out in front of their house. But today, you can go to average Americans' homes and find weapons that are used on the battlefield in their gun cabinet. Your AR-15s can be compared to our cannons. Most people had a couple of pistols and maybe a rifle or two, not cannons. So you have to limit the ability of certain people to get a hold of these weapons. And I personally was a huge advocate of the death penalty for murder and for treason. Those were the only 2 crimes that I believed a person should be put to death, is if they murdered or they committed treason. So in a lot of ways, to me, murder and treason are some of the most horrible things that you can do. So, and I believe that if somebody committed those type of crimes, they should be hung by the neck until dead. So we need to, as a nation, come into the modern times, update our Constitution, which is something that I believed in. No matter what other people say, I believe that the Constitution should be updated to the times that it is relevant in. And we should put away these notions of law-abiding citizens, because anybody can be law-abiding until they're not. And that is a dumb argument, because I would not allow a normal citizen to own a cannon. So why would I allow a law-abiding citizen to own a warship or a tank or an anti-aircraft gun? Do you see what I'm talking about here? It doesn't make any sense. You don't take away weapons. I'm not saying that a person can't hunt with shotguns or rifles or pistols, but no citizen needs weapons of war. And you can read about how I did believe in weapons. I believed in guns, but in all of my genius, I can never foresee the weapons that are there today. And I'm telling you, if I was around today, I would not back a citizen having a weapon of mass destruction. Just like when you misconstrue the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment spoke of civilian militias needing to be well armed. That the rights of the states should not be infringed upon. If you study anything about me, you'll learn that I, Thomas Jefferson, was a huge advocate of states' rights. And when the Civil War took place, a lot of the Southern leaders referred back to me because of my true and powerful belief in states' rights. I believed that rights belonged to the state and the state had a right to defend itself. But now you have standing armies, you have the National Guard. Times have changed. And that's why I said the Constitution is a living document that needs to be updated to the times that are now. And should the people of the United States should not be held to the ignorant past. Because like I said, we crap in buckets. This is Thomas Jefferson. Thanks for hanging out with me. Bye.